So Maurice, thank you very much for coming to the Asian Fire Service Association conference. We've so missed you and we've so missed the personal contact. So Professor Maurice Duffy, a phenomenal change agent, helps people to be better themselves. And in that, one thing I would like to know from you, Maurice, is leadership. How do you crystallize what leadership is when you're talking to leaders?
One of the problems that I have with leaders, Jag, is that most leaders try to make things complex, and in actual fact it's simplicity that's pure genius. And I always think that there are 5 aspects to leadership. 1, learning how to lead yourself, and most people ignore that. 2, learning how to lead an individual. 3, learning how to lead a team. Or 4, learning how to lead an organization. And 5, learning how to kind of lead in a marketplace. But when I talk to them, they always talk to me about how do I change somebody else, never how do I change them. But in actual fact, the genius of great leadership is that it's not a destination, it's a journey, and it's always about learning.
That's excellent. When I was growing up as a young fire officer, John Adair was the concept we used: team, individual and task needs. And when I look at the major incidents around the world, COVID included, and I look at why is that failed? Was it the task of team wasn't fulfilled? Was it that the individual had been forgotten? Or was it that the team needs had been failed? If I was asked you with your 5 concepts, is there something in there other than the point you just said about people forget about self-leadership? What are the other gems that you'd give to a young leader growing up not to forget?
Well, you cannot divorce leadership from context or environment. And in the environment, there's always 2 dynamics that are occurring. There's the written rules and there's the unwritten rules. And those unwritten rules are really important. And in the experiences that I have, those unwritten rules sometimes lead people astray, because the organization, in some cases is corrupt, in some cases is more concerned about organizational brand or reputation rather than the individual needs. So it's really important to understand that you cannot divorce leadership from context or the environment, and you have to learn how to lead within that. But the difficulty that we have is that when we talk about leadership, we're talking about leadership to a point or to a future or to a destination. Most of the leaders come up through the organizations and they learn how to manage. And then when the crisis hits, their default response is to start managing rather than leading. And leadership is all about a microscope and a telescope view. So you have to be able to kind of apply good management practices, but you've also got to think long term and where this is leading you to.
You've given me 2 concepts which I'd like you to expand with your theory. One is what at university professor said to me 40 years ago. So some of the gems you're giving, people will never forget. One is great leaders know how much time to spend on the balcony and how much time to spend on the battlefield. And you'll have coached leaders spend all their time in the battlefield, and those have spent all their time in the balcony. So how would you sort of expand on that concept of people that you've coached?
Again, looking at it, and I've had the opportunity of working with some great generals who have run some kind of major military exercises, and we look at the strategy and we look at the role that they're actually playing. But in any leadership equation, right, what the individual has to be able to do is and. We think that leadership is doing this or this or this or this. It's not. It's doing this and this and this. So taking your question, which is said, how often should I go to the balcony? Regularly, right? Every day, whether it's at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. How often should I be down with the troops? Regularly. When do they need it? But the great leaders lead from behind. They don't lead from in front, right? So they trust their people, but they know when to go and help them, and they know when to stand with them.
For a second. So are you saying to me as a leader, I should use my intuition to know when to be in the balcony and when to be in the battlefield? Or is there something a bit more than that?
Well, you can apply a number of different sciences to it. But I'm saying that, that which feels right is usually right. That which in here you feel is right. Now, if you're thinking about the individual, if you're thinking about the team, if you're thinking about the organization, usually this works. If you're thinking about, just the organization or yourself, that's a bad place to be, right? Because what you tend to do is to discount others' inputs.
There's a couple of other things you said earlier that are in my mind. One is leadership is about understanding the perceived barriers that block you from achieving and the real barriers. And again, when you're coaching, how do you help people to understand what the perceived barriers are, the myths, and what have you found as being the perceived and mythical barriers to leadership?
Yeah, and you know, one of the challenges that I have in coaching is understanding that particular question. And you know, the first question that I ask any individual I'm coaching is, who are you? What do you stand for? So we need to look at that value set. And if that value set is good and it's solid and it's committed, then you can help them in a number of different ways, where to compartmentalize, when to kind of take that helicopter view, when to deep dive down. If their values, or if they don't understand who they are, and I go back to what I said right at the beginning, if they don't know how to lead themselves, then the problem that I'm going to have is it's very difficult to teach them how to lead somebody else.
And would you say there are different styles of leadership in a command and control environment, in a boardroom, in a private sector, or is leadership just leadership?
You see, for me, leadership is a feeling, it's a sense, it's how would I describe it? It's a belief, it's a desire, it's a whole set of mixed emotions. You know, I love people who want to lead, who want to lead, not because they want to showcase themselves, not because that they're ego driven, but because what they want to do is to make the individual greater. And if they approach the matter and saying that, what am I going to do with this individual? Because every team is a group of individuals. How can I help this individual to be greater? And sometimes it is, you know, having the word in the ear. Sometimes it is putting the arm around the shoulders. Sometimes it is backing off. And sometimes it's stepping in. But it's all about, am I building that individual? Am I creating that individual? Am I enabling that individual? Am I empowering that individual? Because, you know, the leader who thinks they have all the answers is destined to fail.
I think that leads neatly into my later life in the fire service, where one of the military leaders we brought in to look at leadership in the fire service, he said, you've got leadership wrong. Leadership for you is what's on your shoulders. Actually, you want to build fellowship. So if you can lead with authenticity, people will follow you because they trust you. And you can't have any greater need for trust than a fire and rescue service when you say to somebody, go in that burning building. So would you agree that fellowship is a key concept of leadership?
Absolutely. You know, so one of the great honors that I had is that I did a lot of work with the military, and I was fascinated on what drove people, you know, to an extent, to go out and be part of the military and take those chances. And I met, you know, a very senior SAS guy who fought in the Iraq War. And he described to me how he thought of leadership, and it's always stayed with me. And he says that in the Iraq War, when we went kind of behind enemy lines, and there were 5 or there were 6 of us, and we were in a little room, and we've got to run up a hill in the morning, and you know, it's not very nice, but we got to run up this hill in the morning, and there's a whole bunch up there with a machine gun, so we got to take them out. He says, when we're sitting there with strategy, and we're strategizing how we're going to do it, he says, I have to look around and know that they're with me. I have to know it, and they have to know I'm with them. When we go out the door in the morning, I can't have them saying, hang on a second, can we just take some time out here for a minute, because I'm not sure what we're doing is right. I cannot be halfway up that hill and find that I'm in front or I'm behind. It has to be us together. So when you talk about fellowship, it is about that sense of connection, about that sense of community, and about that sense of being in it together.
So to all my colleagues in the Asian Fire Service Association, this has been a phenomenal conversation, but a short soundbite. We're going to have a longer conversation with Maurice during our conference, but I do recommend that you read Maurice's books, you follow Maurice on Twitter, because every day I learn something new from his website, from his podcast. So Maurice, give me an elevator pitch on what you believe leadership to be.
Making an individual better.
I can't top that. Can anybody top that? Leadership is about making individuals better and the team better, the organisation better, because that follows the 5 concepts you gave us. Maurice, thank you very much.
Pleasure.